the United States appears ready to admit its true intentions in Ukraine. It was never about the people. It was never about the freedom of Ukraine at all. That was, of course, a joke. Remember when Kamala Harris stood up and said, we're going into Ukraine. We're supporting Ukraine for democracy.
When America stands for her principles.
Yeah, we're standing for democracy. We're standing for freedom, right? Our principles. Yeah. That's what it was never about that. They could care less about the people of Ukraine. They could care less about the freedom of the people of Ukraine. They don't care about that at all. Rather, its true intentions, though, are to create a forever war in Ukraine, something we've been warning about here on this show for many, many months, and a singular goal with that forever war, which is to degrade and destroy Russia's capacity to fight. That is it, full stop. That's the mission. Over the weekend, we got some fresh insights and corroboration of that from journalists, but also members of the United States Congress and military leaders about their intentions to support the most corrupt government in Europe for many, many years to come. So here is Branko Marcetic over at the Responsible Statecraft. He does a good job summarizing last week's movements. Are U.S. officials signaling a new forever war in Ukraine? You already know the answer to that. So here's what Branko says. He says, this increasingly looks to be the case. On Saturday, the Financial Times reported that the United States officials are privately girding for what increasingly looks like a war of attrition that will last well into next year, echoing an earlier Wall Street Journal report that military strategists and policymakers across the West are already starting to think about next year's spring offensive and about how to prepare for a protracted conflict. So they're already thinking about next year's spring offensive because the first release of that spring offensive was a real hit. So we're already thinking about the sequel. We're already planning the sequel for this one. On Saturday, we had this information now from the Financial Times, then the Wall Street Journal, and now this is the front page of the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago. The Wall Street Journal cites a number of U.S. officials who say why Russia's war in Ukraine could run for years. And I love they call it Russia's war in Ukraine, when the only reason it's being protracted and elongated is because of NATO. In the extension of it, that's the reason it could run for years. It's not because Russia wants to extend it for years. It's because NATO does. That's its true intentions.
Well, let's not forget who has been funding the war in Ukraine since 2014. That is the International Monetary Fund. Europe and the United States has been funding Ukraine, bombing the Donbass since 2014. Also, they were supporting those same people going into Crimea, which Russia stopped. Right. And so whose war? Ukraine has been at war for a decade now. So.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And someone in the chat says, well, a forever war means just extending it into 2024. No, because that's like if you had a scale of like when someone says, how far in the future do you think this is going to go? Well, it could extend into 2024, but we're going to get into the details of other policymakers who see this going on for many, many years to come. So how many of you, show of hands, honestly believe that the United States, NATO, full stop, they're out of Ukraine in 2024? How many people? Just show of hands, let us know in the chat, yes or no. Do you think this is over in 2024, or does this extend for many, many years? And not in the sense like trench warfare, but like a permanent garrison state continues in perpetuity funding a military operation in Ukraine. Think about that in the long term. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say Afghanistan is a forever war. That was 20 years. Mm-hmm. And make no mistake, we are still there and we will never leave. We're not there officially ever, but we have a base, we have all this, so we're always going to be there. So that is a forever war.
Yeah, and when U.S. taxpayer dollars go to fund things in Afghanistan or Iraq, we're building another base in Iraq, but that war is over. Mission accomplished in Iraq. So what more evidence do you need of a forever war? And so again, the Wall Street Journal is saying this could run on for many, many years to come. And they cite a number of U.S. officials who admit Ukraine can never win this war. They say they can never win this war, but they can't have Russia win it either. There's the rub, right? Therefore, it will drag on for years to come.
But we recently talked about this with Ramzi Baroud. What happens then is that is the template that happened to the Middle East, right? Mm-hmm. Where we saw previously prosperous places or places that at least had, a lot of more advanced civilization than we like to think they had, Libya, Syria, right? Places that were advancing their GDP, advancing their standard of life, and then dragged through the rubble. And so we have to think, people who are European residents, is that our future? Right? Is that what's happening next? That what will happen to Ukraine? Will that then spread like the plague west?
That's the real concern. Absolutely right. And as the warden in our chat here on YouTube says, you know damn well it's going to be longer. Yeah, it's not going into 2024. You know damn well it's going to be much, much longer. But
so people in the West will be able to think like, oh, Ukraine, it wasn't ever really that great before anyway, and now it's a war zone. That's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and we will forget the same way we forget that Syria was prosperous, that Libya was prosperous, and on its way to more prosperity. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Tell me a place that the United States has established a presence and then left. Tell me one place. Because once we establish a presence, we do not leave.
No, it's like Hydra, and it reaches its tentacles into everything. Where do we go that we... Oh, Japan? No, sorry. Philippines? No. Yeah, you can't think of a place.
The moon?
The moon... Yeah, there's one. Although...
Okay, you got me.
Our trash.
The moon base. So what's important to understand is that everything is going, though, according to plan. And on the Ukrainian side of things, Ukraine was never meant to win this war. That was never part of the plan. There was never a chance that was ever going to happen to begin with. The United States and its NATO allies have been using Ukraine since 2014. Actually, before that, but really in earnest in 2014, from the very beginning after installing a puppet government to do its bidding, all with the singular purpose that is now coming directly into view. It was never about Ukraine's freedom. It was always about using Ukrainian men as cannon fodder to try to degrade Russia's military. And one of Ukraine's neo-Nazi military leaders admits that this was always the plan. Watch, this is really telling.
Не тому, що ми хороші, як нам кажуть, нам допомагає Захід, бо вони хочуть нам блага, тому що ми виконуємо задачі Заходу. Тому що ми єдині, хто готові їх виконувати, бо нам весело, нам прикольно убивати і прикольно воювати. І вони думають, вау, давайте вже подивимося, що це буде. Тому виник цей новий альянс, про який зараз говорять там Туреччина, Польща, Британія, Україна. Тут ми тут флагман, тому що ми затіяли війну, якої не було вже останніх 60 років. Так от.
Yeah, so we are the flagmen. This was the plan. This was the plan all along. It's an unbelievable statement that we knew we were being used in this way. So we have all of these guys who are like kind of bloodthirsty. Here's an idea, give them all weapons. So they knew it from the beginning that all of these Nazis running around, what if we gave them weapons and told them, hey, why don't you guys go shoot some Russians? Right now you guys are using baseball bats, but what if NATO stepped in and gave you guys some weapons? How would that sound? Oh, we would love that. That was all part of the plan. And did it work? Well, in fact, it, of course, provoked the war in Ukraine. In fact, the very same year that the United States and NATO allies backed the coup in Ukraine, which overthrew a democratically elected government and installed a puppet regime to do the West's bidding, the BBC, of all networks, did the unthinkable. They released a documentary and a report on the rise of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They didn't know it at the time, that the United States and its allies were actively supporting these groups to carry out these attacks against the people living in eastern Ukraine at the time, stoking a war with Russia. But again, this is not some right-wing publication. This is the BBC. Watch this report on the rise of neo-Nazis. Watch.
In place of the defiant speeches, the somber strains of Beethoven now ring out over Independence Square. This revolution is moving into a new phase. But amidst the flowers and the children's tributes, flashes of something more sinister. Groups of armed men strut through the square with dubious iconography.
Dubious.
That yellow armband is a Volksangel, a German symbol used by several SS divisions during the Second World War. Far-right graffiti is appearing, daubed on the walls of the city. A group calling itself the Right Sector is perhaps the largest. Its members can be seen marching around Kiev in columns of about a dozen. Mostly they carry baseball bats.
And then NATO had an idea. Hey, what if we take away those baseball bats? Those are ineffective. You can only hit or kill one person at a time, really, unless you line up a whole bunch of people. What if we gave them guns? NATO's brilliant, right? And what if we gave them Javelin missiles? What if we gave them other things that could really wreak havoc and create a genocide, really? That's exactly what the U.S. did, using these men to provoke a war with Russia. And they knew exactly what they were doing. The first part of the plan is working. It has worked. Ukrainian men are being utterly destroyed. Here is the new report out today, this new numbers today from the meat grinder, show that at last week alone, Ukraine lost over 4,855 men. Just wrap your heads around that for a minute. Just I always, when you think about these numbers like that, just keep that up on the screen for a second. Just think about like going to a baseball game or something like that. It helps me to think in terms of like going to a stadium or something like that. And think about 4,855 men in that stadium destroyed over the past week. That is what we're dealing with here. And just 785 men killed on Saturday as they continue to push this BS, this BS counteroffensive idea, pushing them forward. So the first part of the plan in the meat grinder is working. NATO is killing Ukrainians faster than they can make them. Senator Mitt Romney is very happy about this. His plan is working as a Raytheon man himself, as he reminds Americans, no Americans are dying in our fight against Russia. It's Ukrainians that are dying. He loves it. Watch.
Being able to take an amount which equals about 5% of our military budget, but actually less than 5% of our military budget each year to help the Ukrainians is about the best national defense spending I think we've ever done. We're losing no lives in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are fighting heroically against Russia that has 1,500 nuclear weapons aimed at us. It's like, so we're diminishing and devastating the Russian military for a very small amount of money relative to what we spend in the rest of defense. A weakened Russia is a good thing, and the best thing we can do for America is to see people who have nuclear weapons aimed at us getting weaker.
That's racism.
And it's also a lie that we're degrading the United States. We heard
when
literally...
When you let other people die in your cause.
Yeah.
That's racism.
We heard from the European theater, the head of that, saying in general, saying absolutely not. That's not the case at all. That Russia's army is not being degraded at all. In fact, it's become stronger as a result of this. Go ahead, Philip.
I was just going to say that I thought the whole point of proxy war was that you keep quiet about it. You know what I mean? Like you're not supposed to come right out and say, hey, you're fighting our proxy war for us. Good job, buddy. I mean, that's just like, at that point, it's just borderline evil.
But who are we hiding it from at this point? Because Ukrainians know it. I mean, Ukrainians know they are being used by the United States. The Ukrainians know they are being used by NATO. Ukrainians are not stupid. They know they're being used. They know they're being thrown into the meat grinder and being handed all of this money and weapons. Go ahead, David.
That's where my question comes in. It's like they talk about this offensive, but what do these men think they're going to do if they've seen what's happening? This many people are dying. How are any of them still even wanting to push forward?
They don't.
You can only force them so much.
They don't. That's why we see, people defecting. That's why they don't have the choice. This is they're slaves.
Entire mechanized brigades being wiped away. I mean, just I was going down a laundry list of the entire, like a number of different brigades that just totally wiped away. Tank units, everything just destroyed. Armored vehicle units just destroyed. So of course
if in any way we are able to see them as other than us, then that is modern day racism. That is not like, oh, but it's just not us, then that's okay, right? And it's the same way that we were able to see anyone Middle Eastern as other. It's not us. We don't relate to them as human beings. And then that makes it okay because we can arm distance these wars like this. Then I don't want to hear anything about any other microaggressions of racism if we literally can say it's okay that something that's other than us is dying.
So Mitt Romney is very happy about this. I mean, no American lives have been lost in this proxy war that we know of, right? That have been published, right? NATO gets to kill Ukrainians, which they love doing, to carry out their war against Russia. And again, it was all part of this plan. The Washington Post reporting yesterday that most senior U.S. officials want to keep supporting the proxy war against Russia and are not looking for any kind of peace plan at all, despite the knowledge that their paltry counteroffensive hasn't done anything at all except kill Ukrainian men. And in a separate Washington Post report, U.S. intelligence officials admit that Ukraine's offensive will fail. So it's not
got to be past tense now. Like,
well, yeah,
but stupid.
It's so.
Who are they fooling?
But they're trying to push on. So even these like small little incremental movements, it's costing them tens of thousands of lives. Oh, so they take over a small village, which serves really no military strategic importance at all. And these people are being wiped away. I think it's so important. It's not about Russia and Ukraine. It really is about NATO using these people and the United States using these people to further its own aims. Like, when are people going to wake up about this proxy war? It's never about freeing Ukraine. It was never about democracy in Ukraine. If it were about democracy in Ukraine, then Biden would be outraged that Zelensky canceled elections in Ukraine, which he did recently. And Zelensky now knows he's losing favor with the West, right? As ex-CIA Larry Johnson has pointed out on our show, and others, that Zelensky's about to be thrown under the bus. Europe is tiring of him. So he's about to be thrown under the bus, and he knows this. So he's calling the West's bluff now. Zelensky is calling their bluff, saying, sure, okay, I'll hold elections if the U.S. government will pay me $5 billion Ukrainian dollars to carry it out, which is like $125 million. Yeah, I'll do it, but you guys have to fund the elections. So he's calling their bluff. Watch.
Я її лінці сформулював дуже швидко, і він був дуже задоволений. Якщо наші парламентарі готові, чому? Тому що нам потрібні тоді зміни до законодавства у Виборчий кодекс. Якщо я сказав йому, ви готові мені дати 5 мільярдів, тому що я не людина, яка займається бруківкою, і не зможу просто забрати з бюджету 5 мільярдів, мені здається, саме така сума потрібна на проведення виборів в звичайний час, а у військовий я не знаю, що це за сума, тому я йому сказав, якщо Сполучені Штати Америки разом з Європою дадуть нам фінансову підтримку, вибачте, я нічого не прошу, проводити вибори в кредит я не буду, забирати гроші від зброї і давати їх на вибори також не буду. І це передбачено законодавством. Є моменти за кордоном. Тут нам потрібно, щоб допомогла в більшості своїй Європі, тому що українець сьогодні в більшості в Європейському Союзі, і там треба відкривати. У нас таких інфраструктурних спроможностей немає. Там треба відкривати відповідні можливості, щоб люди прийшли.
That's awful. That's awful.
So you need to pay us so we can hold elections.
Can you imagine, though, like you have a husband or a son, and they will be dragged into war because of this leader that you have no opportunity to vote out?
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is your leader. And you can see interviews all across Ukraine. When you actually have people who are doing interviews and talking to actual citizens, they're calling the guy an absolute moron. Come to my town and see what you've done to my town, to my buildings, to the people that have all died in this town because of you.
And people will die.
And no wonder he doesn't want to hold elections.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and he said something also very telling to me there, where he said holding elections under martial law. So does that mean the military would be out there regulating the elections, making people show up, not allowing people that they didn't want to? You know how they have pretty much eliminated some parties? Like under martial law, I think an election would be,
a farce.
That's a really good point.
A farce.
Yeah, because he's used martial law to shut down churches, to shut down opposition parties, to shut down media. So, there's no telling what kind of elections would even be there. But if if you're someone who thinks like, look, I need my family to not be dragged into war, and so we need peace leaders for peace. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that someone who stands for peace is elected. You don't even have that opportunity to try.
So America's getting the best bang for our buck. Like, just pay us, and we'll hold elections. Like, that's what we trust.
We can afford to.
I can't imagine anything
regular
more
elections. Peacetime elections, we can afford. The wartime elections, we need a ton of money.
Yeah. But what about the 100 or 200 billion we've already sent you? Can you take some of that money out of there, or no? Is that already gone to into the pockets of people?
We paid for a coup, to overturn the election in the first place, or overturn the government in 2014. We paid for that.
Yeah, as Victoria, and she's not just saying that as like a funny aside. Like, Victoria Nuland openly admitted to the amount of money that we funneled into Ukraine to carry out basically the Maidan coup and put in a puppet regime. So I mean,
we can afford it. This is the government we want. That's why we're not stepping up for it.
Meanwhile, there's people getting $700 in Maui and are sleeping on the sides of, convenience stores that didn't burn down in Hawaii because, this is a priority right now. America is getting the best bang for its buck in their election in Ukraine, enriching the lives of Mitt Romney and Raytheon, using Ukrainians to do it, while at the same time trying to degrade Russia, which has failed miserably. So there's your war. That's your forever war is going to continue on, and it's going to enrich the people like Mitt Romney, and it's going to crush average Ukrainians for many, many years to come. Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.